Oh, no, wait a minute. I have to warm up.
The boy, you know.
The boy.
There about hangs the
Ray
tail.
thought that
No.
would
Oh, the boy.
Yeah,
Well.
about the boy.
like this.
You're going to confuse
Well, the end is in sight, as the little boy said, as he crawled under the barbed wire.
Tell us about the horse.
The horse. What? Oh, you mean about the horse? A horse. Oh, a horse is a. No, wait a minute. Let me get that straight now. Damn it. A horse. No.
a camel.
Oh, yes, that's right. Now I got it. A camel is a horse designed by a committee. Watch repair? No. Well, this man needed his watch repaired, so he walked through the town. He noticed a little store with watches and clocks in the window. He goes in, he looks around, it's quite a bare room, except in the corner he sees a figure seated, a little old Jewish man. And he walks up and he said, "Are you the watchmaker?" So says, "No, no." So, no, he says, "But look," he said, "I need my watch repaired, and this is a watch repair shop, isn't it?" He said, no. He said, "Well, what are you? What is it?" He said, "I am the mohel." The mohel is, you know what a mohel is? That is the religious man who makes the circumcisions. Jewish in Jewish life. That Mohel. You never heard of it?
Not
Never
that
heard?
word, no.
Mohel is a religious man who
That's the circle.
Yes, that's
Now I
it.
know.
You've heard of it. Well, anyway, he said, "I'm a Mohel." He said, "Yes." He said, "A Mohel." He said, "But well, look," he said, "I walked in here, all the watches in the window." He says, "I walked in here to get my watch repaired." He says, what is it about these watches in the window?" He said, "What would you put in the window?"
You're a nurse, right, Ellen? Well, this doctor came out of this office and he was laughing, you know. And the nurse, nice-looking nurse, came up. She says, "Doctor, what's so funny?" He says, "I just came out of that room." He says, "There's a man in there." He says, "Would you believe it? He has tiny written right on his penis." Oh, come on. Yeah, go on, take a look at it. It's so funny. So she goes in, and she's there, and he's waiting. About a half hour later, she finally comes out. She says, "Doctor, you were very wrong. It wasn't tiny. It's Ticonderoga, New York."
Story about the priest who was never relaxed and couldn't give a good sermon. Did you hear? Do you know that story? Anyway, I'll tell it to you.
Yeah, well, you tell it.
It's about this young priest who could never give a good sermon. So he decided to go to the old priest and find out why, because he was never relaxed. So the old priest said, "Look, next Sunday before the Mass, fill your glass of gin and drink it down, and that should relax you." So sure enough, next Sunday he drank it, and he spoke up a storm. After it was over, he went to the old priest. He said, "Father, how did I do?" He said, "Well, you were relaxed, but there's a few things that have to be straightened out. Number one, there are 12 apostles, not 10. Number two, there are 10 commandments, not 12. Number three, you do not refer to Jesus Christ as the late J.C. Number four, David slew Goliath. He did not beat the shit out of him." Number five, there was a taffy pulling contest at St. Peter's, not a Peter pulling contest at St. Taffy's. And finally, you do not refer to the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost as Big Daddy, Junior, and the Spook.
Hippies that wanted to get married.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, you see what I mean?
I didn't record that last year.
You didn't? Well, these two hippies drive up to this minister and knock on the door. They want to get married. So the old minister calls his wife down and opens his book, and then he looks to the left and he looks to the right, The hair was the same. The contours were the same. He couldn't tell which was the male, which was the female. And he was stuck. He didn't know what to say. Finally, he thought of something. He said, "May I ask, which one of you has a menstrual cycle?" He says, "It must be him. I've got a Honda." Stories there.
Story coming up.
Golf story coming up.
Who's telling it? You?
Ah, yeah.
He knows what?
Volunteer.
He wants to hear.
This golf
Clean story.
This golf enthusiast was driving up to the Concord, which is a tremendous hotel.
Up in the
The Concord Hotel. A golf enthusiast, the golf player. All right. So golf player. So on the way up, he had to stop for gasoline in a place, and the fella got in conversation. He said, "Where you headed?" He says, "I'm going up to the Concord." He says, "Why you go up there?" He says, "Why don't you stay right here?" He says, "We have a tremendous golf course here, and there's a motel here, and it's very much cheaper." He says, "Well, that's not a bad idea. I will." We stayed there. Stayed there a couple of days. And then at the end of the time, he asked for his bill. So he goes over his bill. A bill for $75 for balls. He says, "What the hell is this?" He says, "Come here." He says, "What is this?" $75 for balls. He says, "Oh," he says, yes, you see, at the Concord, they have you by the room."
This is best done by someone who has a good British accent, which I unfortunately don't have at all. So anyway, you have to fill it in for yourselves. Englishman and his wife went to the opera one night, and he'd never been to the opera, and he didn't particularly care for good music or opera or anything else like this, but she dragged him along. So they sat in this box, and they sat through the first act, and he was bored to tears, and he had to go to the men's room at the end of the act. So he turned to his wife and he said, "My dear, will you excuse me? I have to go to the men's room, to the water closets." So, yeah. So he steps out of the box and looks around. He sees this labyrinth of hallway, you see. So he starts walking down the hall, dimly lit, and he comes to an attendant, and he said, "My good man, can you tell me which way is the men's room?" So the man says, "Yes." He says, "You go down 2 halls, turn right, go down 3 halls, turn left, turn right again," and blah, blah. He goes on with these incredible directions. So he takes off. Of course, he had a couple of drinks before he got to the opera in the first place. So he takes off. He's going through the entire second act. Anyway, he finally finds his way. He goes hall after hall after hall. He finally comes to the most beautiful men's room he's ever seen. It's got a fountain in the center, and it's got beautiful lighting, and it's just gorgeous, And he looks at it, "My word," he said, "these opera people really do things up well." So he goes and he does his business, and he heads back to his box. He gets back to his box, sits down next to his wife, and says, "What act are we in?" She says, "The third act." He says, "How was the second act?" She says, "You ought to know, you were in it." This is not a joke. That was the stock joke. I mean, that joke.
You did Cardinal Socola, who lost out for the nomination for the Pope. No?
Like the Pope.
You didn't hear anything about that. This is very good. Yes, the Cardinal Socola. Is your friend listening? No. No, he's not listening.
I don't know what he knows. No, tell it to Ray anyway.
Tell it to Ray anyway. I wanted to end.
He has to take his son to the second round.
Oh, well, good enough. All right, turn it off.
Okay, go ahead, Howard.
I have to have his attention first.
Cardinal Socola.
No.
You know about that, Ray?
I've heard it, but I like it so much I'd like to hear it again.
All right, you didn't hear the story about Cardinal Socola?
Forte.
Well, Cardinal Socola was nominated for Pope, but he lost out completely because they were very afraid of how he might be referred to in the future. They didn't want him to be known as Pope Socola.
Isn't that awful?
His story, Doc Brody's story, really. He's the one that originated it.
Howard,
What?
I want to describe an actual scene in that big gymnasium where we have that conference office, the two sisters came running into that gymnasium to announce that a pope had been named.
Great.
And then one of the nuns looked at me, she said she wanted to explain that they named the pope after the other two popes. They used the name of one, and then they used the name of the other. So he got two names. So he now Pope John Paul. I said, they missed the boat. If they only had another pope whose name was Jones, he would have been Pope John Paul Jones. Yeah, they laughed.
There are two fellas walking along the street. Can you hear me down there? Yeah. Two fellas walking along the street. One turns to the other one and says, "Wow, did you see that woman pass by? That girl passed by." And he says, "Gee, was she stacked?" The other says, "No." What was it? What was it? I lost my punch.
Arthritis.
Oh, that's right. Arthritis. Okay. That's what does it. Sorry about that.
Go ahead. One about two blacks who were walking along the street. Two sisters came by. I told this before. One of them turned to the other and said, "Hey man, what kind of women them?" The other one said, "Them's nuns." You know, come on now, stop pulling my leg. What kind of women them? I said, "I'm telling you, them's nuns." You know, what the hell does that mean? Because that means they ain't had none, they ain't getting none, they ain't never gonna get none.
It's a dirty story.
The little boys left.
And Ray's heard it, and everybody's heard it except Michael, and he's got his girlfriend with him. I don't want to tell her right now. He's too young.
Ray has one for you.
Yeah, the master is ready.
I like to tell him. He always laughs at my jokes.
He's a good friend.
This fella walked into the doctor's office. He said, "The doc, Doc, I got a problem." So, well, what seems to be the matter? He said, "Well," he says, "I keep stuttering." He said, "He can't stop it." The doc says, "Well, come in the office. I'll take a look. See, give you an examination. See what the problem might be." So he goes in the office and says, "Kindly strip your clothes." He says, "I'll give you an examination." So he took his clothes off. And before he got even on the table, the doctor says, "Oh, I can see your problem right now." He says, "You can?" He says, "Sure." He says, "Your penis is so long, it's just draining." He says, "Putting awful strain on your vocal cords."
Come on, this is not the
He says, "Well, what can you do?" He says, "Well," he says, "simple operation." He says, "No problem." He says, "You'll be in the hospital a couple of days." He says, "I'll take care of it." He says, "Please do it as soon as possible." So the doctor made an appointment for him, and he went to the hospital, and the examination was over with. He operated. About 2 months later, he's walking down the street. Who does he see but the doctor walking down the street? He said, "Hi, Doc." He says, "You really did a wonderful job on me." He says, I don't stutter at all." He said, "But my damn sex life is terrible." He says, "Sorry, I can't help you." So they bought a camel, and they got on the camel, and they're going to ride down to Shea Stadium to the ball game. So they get on this camel, and they're going down the expressway down.
Faster than the cars, I'll bet.
And the cars, the three of them get on this expressway, and they're going down there, and all the cars are looking at them, and the people are, gazing at them, and they get to Shea Stadium, and they get to the parking lot, and the guy won't let them in. He says, why not? He says, "Well, you're no automobile." He says, "Yeah, but we're willing to pay the parking fees like any car." He says, "It's a means of transportation." He says, do you have anything that says that we can't come in with our camel? He says, no. He should figure it out. He says, okay, if you're going to pay for it, okay, you can go in. So they took the camel in, they parked it in number 78 lot, you know, and they went in to see the ball game. The Mets were playing somebody, Cleveland, I guess, the Mets, Cincinnati. So they watched the game, and when they came out to get to their parking area, they found there were 12 camels out there. And they couldn't figure out which camel was. And this guy says, look, he says, I'm going to have no trouble. I'll find the right camel. He's going around, he's lifting up their tail, and he's looking underneath. He says, well, what are you looking for? He says, I heard some guy say, look at the 3 nuts on that camel.
Story. It's the same story. Yeah, 2 guys in West, except that the terminology is a little different. 2 guys in West Virginia buy a camel, and they decide to go to Ohio. So they get out their camel, they take off for Ohio, and as they cross the border, they go through a toll station. So they pay the toll, and they continue on. They get to a little town just on the other side of the border. This is exactly the same story. And they want to drink, so they park the camel outside this bar. They go in the bar, they have a couple of beers, they come out, the camel's gone. So they go to the police station, which is across the street, and they report a stolen camel. So the guy, the night clerk there sitting there says, okay, what can I do for you? He said, we want to report a stolen camel. Yeah, you want to report a stolen camel. Okay. What kind of a camel? Well, it was an ordinary brown camel. All right, brown camel. Okay. How big was it? Well, it was big like all the camels, you know. All right, so it's a big camel. Any distinguishing characteristics? He says, no. The other guy says, yeah, wait a minute. He says, don't you remember the guy at the toll booth says, look at those 2 assholes on that camel?
It's the same story.
Well,
Yes.
I'd like a copy of this taken right now. It would do very well entertaining me all the way to Pittsburgh, I'm sure.
Oh, that's your mother. Well, Mother, I'm so glad to meet you. Enjoyed working with your daughter.
The pleasure for coming.
I was very much disliked. Was asked to.
Start from the beginning, Howard.
There was a general there who was not a very popular person. He was asked to lead the parade. So he called his adjutant in. He said, I want you to get the stallion that I led the parade. Well, he said, General, he said, that was not a stallion. He said, that was a mare. He said, oh, no. He said, that was a stallion. I know very well. He said, as I was going down leading the parade, he said, I heard someone say, who was that big prick on that? Oh, look at that big prick on that stallion.
The British colonel who was assigned to the Sahara Desert. And he was at this little outpost, miles and miles from nowhere. And he'd been there about 3 months. And he was beginning to feel some of the more natural urges. So he called in his adjutant one day and he said, or sergeant, he said, Sergeant, tell me, what do the men do for, what do they do to get out of the humdrum activity of this outpost? He said, what do they do for pleasure? The sergeant says, well, sir, they get the camel. No, I won't hear of it. So, okay, and he dismisses him. So he calls him in a month later and he says, now, Sergeant, I want you to tell me, I wish I had a British accent. This is so great. It was told to me by a Briton. I'm going to ask you again, what do the men do for their physical pleasure on this outpost? And he said, well, as I started to tell you, sir, they get the camel. No, I will have none of this. So he throws him out again. About a month later, he can't stand it anymore. And he calls him and he says, Sergeant, about that camel. So the sergeant he says, get the camel ready. So they take the camel out, they wash it, they curry it, or whatever the hell you do with a camel, they clean it all up. colonel comes out. He makes it with the camel, and he finishes and washes his hands, and he says, "Well, Sergeant, is that similar to what the men do?" He said, "No, sir. As a matter of fact, what they do is they get out the camel, they go to town."
This is back to World War I, was the Russians and the Italians who were fighting. They were on the same side, fighting the Germans.
I know this one.
And at this time, you know, these two generals got together. One was Italian and one was a Russian. And they were deciding their plan of attack, and then the Russian says to his aide, he says, Asha, will you get me my red jacket? Red jacket. So the Italian says, what do you want a red jacket? He says, well, when I wear a red jacket and they hit me, they shoot me, he says, all the blood will not show, and they will not know, you know, that I am hit, and I'll be a brave man, and I will continue to fight. So the Italian general turns out to his pieces, "Private, bring me my brown pants."
And in order to get away from her, he'd go to his club. This one night he got away from his wife and went to the club, and it so happened they were having a contest to tell about the most exciting moment in their lives. One man says, when I went and played baseball and I got 3 home runs in a row. Another man said, when I bowled and I hit a 300 score, perfect score. The third one said, when I played golf and I got a hole-in-one. And this poor guy is sitting in the back, and they said, how about you? He said, well, to tell you the truth, he said, the most exciting moment in my life is when I spent it between my wife's legs. So they figured, gee, you know, after the contest was over, they said, look, this man told the truth. That is the most exciting moment in any man's life. Let's give him the loving cup. He deserves it. So they give him the loving cup, and he goes home. And his wife says, where the hell were you, you big bum? What do you got there? He says, I won that at a contest. She says, what kind of a contest? He says, well, they had a contest to tell about the most exciting moment in our lives. And he said, she said, what did you tell him, you big bum? He says, I told him that when I went to church with you. She couldn't figure that out, see? So she forgot it for a while. The next day she went out shopping. She met some of the fellas from the club. And she said, gee, you know, that was nice of you to give that loving cup to my husband, but I can't understand it. He was only there once and he fell asleep while he was at it.
It started out, it reminded me about the 2 nuns who one night walked down a dark street, got to the end of the street, they were attacked and raped.